Focusing on some breaking news in the Premier League, in the last few moments, the Premier League's released a statement saying that Premier League clubs have reluctantly but unanimously decided not to release players for international matches played in red list countries in September. So, gents, to describe what this is all about, over here in the UK, there are certain countries on a red list, an amber list, and green list. Green is good. You can travel there without quarantining. Amber, there's some restrictions. And red, you cannot do that. You have to come back in and quarantine in a hotel. You and I would have to pay thousands of pounds to do that. And there are no exemptions for these players traveling to Argentina, Brazil, Egypt for all World Cup qualifiers in September. So the Premier League goes on to say in their statement that they strongly support this decision from the clubs, and it will apply to nearly 60 players from 19 Premier League teams who are due to travel to 26 red list countries in the September international window. And they add some context to this and say this follows FIFA's current position not to extend its temporary release exception for players required to quarantine on their return from international duty. So what that means is Mohamed Salah, all the Brazilian players in the Premier League, like Fabinho, Fernandinho, obviously Emiliano Martinez at Aston Villa, all these players after they return from international duty would have to go into a hotel for 10 days and could not play in the Premier League, which is just not going to work. Andy Edwards, your reaction to this news? I think this is something we saw coming with the situation in the UK, perhaps quite different than it is elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, they've clearly put this off until the last possible moment, hoping that something might change and that the fortunes, might be different, but things all around the world are just not changing. And so at the end of the day, common sense prevails, and we prioritize the public health and safety of people elsewhere in the country, not just the footballers. This is not just about them. If they go to one of these countries currently on the red list, contract COVID, bring it back. That's more COVID in a country that otherwise wouldn't have it. And so it's really unfortunate that this is the situation that we're still in. But at the end of the day, the clubs are always going to do what is right for them. And these players are very expensive investments that they have already made, and that they still need performances and product on the field, and they need that to be at the very best that it can. And one of the things that I don't think we've heard a lot about or talked a lot about is even when players contract COVID and they recover from it and they come back, there have been a number of players that haven't seemed to be exactly the same, that have taken a bit of time. And Paul Pogba might be one of the best examples of that. Last season, I think about midpoint of the season, contracted COVID, was not good at all for a couple months when he came back. And then towards the tail end of the season, really looked to start flourishing, and we see what he's done to start this season. So it's just, it's going to continue to affect this. And so my question will be is, are any of these games going to be able to be rescheduled internationally? You wouldn't imagine so, because the windows are pretty much set with FIFA. There's only so many opportunities to get these games in between now and the World Cup. So opportunities, I guess, for players that wouldn't have otherwise expected to be thrown into the start of World Cup qualifying.
And I have to say there's some big implications, especially in the Concacaf region here, because Mexico, Costa Rica is on the red list for the UK. So Raul Jimenez, as it stands, will not be able to play for Mexico in these huge World Cup qualifiers. And as you said, Andy, Brazil, Argentina, they're going to be missing a lot of big players in South America for World Cup qualifiers as well. So this, Nick, is something that we said is quite predictable. Obviously, the summer tournaments were different because players were away with their teams all summer. They could quarantine when they on arrival to wherever the camp was or wherever the tournaments were, and spend all summer with those teams with protocols and everything else in place. But it is kind of concerning looking ahead to the fall in September, October, November. It may not be a different situation unless FIFA, like Andy says, finds some dates from somewhere, which doesn't look like they can, or governments or some kind of other exemptions are put in place. And that was another part of the statement. The FA said, and the Premier League said they were working with the FA and the British government to try and get an exemption for these players. But because of all the problems it could cause, they can't do that. So we're going to be talking about this, I think, for the next few months at the very least.
Joe, we know from past experience that when people head inside, the numbers tend to go up. Panama, USA is October 10th. That's Christian Pulisic and Josh Sargent unavailable to the U.S. for that game. This is a big deal. Zach Steffen, this is a big deal because I don't think the numbers are going to go down. Now, what the UK views as red list, green list. Now, the one thing that really kind of tripped me up, and I don't want to go in a weird direction here, but that second game, right? So Mohamed Salah was not going to be allowed to go to Egypt, but they said perhaps, the Gabon game would be fine. Well, those players are coming from Egypt. So this becomes extremely tricky. Yep. I'm very worried. And really, it's going to be about everyone across the world following pandemic guidelines and trying to keep each other safe. And have we seen that that's reasonable to expect? I don't think so.
And even here in the Premier League, players, the very low number of players and staff are testing positive, but it's still happening. Christian Pulisic obviously tested positive recently for Chelsea. Been missing for them. There's some concern about whether he will be included in the squad and what his fitness status is. As Andy said, will he recover? Will he come back anytime soon for Chelsea? So we'll have to wait and see. It's a developing situation. But yeah, the latest breaking news from the Premier League is that reluctantly players who are playing in red list countries during the upcoming international break will not be released, will not be allowed to travel for these huge World Cup qualifiers and other games. So, gents, thanks for joining me for Pro Soccer Talk this week. We've covered a lot there, transfer news, wrapping up the action, looking ahead to next week and some breaking news as well. So I think we should all go and grab another beer after this. And I look forward to chatting with you soon and enjoying the Premier League action this weekend. Take care. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Speak to you soon.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series, and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches, and much more.